Hello friends, welcome back for another video. Today's video is a little bit more of a podcast style video. We're going to be answering some of your Q&A questions that you submitted surrounding the topic of adoption. Because this video is more of a podcast style video, you may notice that the editing format is not like my usual videos, and I just wanted to explain that really quickly before we get into it. So I hope you enjoy. Okay guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kim Martin, and today I'm here with my mom. Her name is Sheila. And I recently shared my adoption story at adoption camp, and I put that video on YouTube and got a lot of positive feedback. I've had some of the most amazing conversations with people since posting that video in my emails, just connecting with different people who've experienced adoption or have adopted, people in my DMs. We've just had some fantastic conversations, but with those conversations have come a lot of questions from different sides of the aisle, questions from other people who were adopted, who are still processing the information that they've been given, processing their story, processing what their life has been like, and then also questions from people who have adopted children, and asking questions like, from my perspective, ways they can help their child that has been adopted. Just a lot of conversation around adoption, and it has been so special to me. Before I posted that video, I remember telling my husband, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for these conversations. I don't know if I'm ready to open up and talk about this. And since doing it, it has been so healing. It's been so great to just connect with people that have felt what I've felt, have experienced what I've experienced, and just have come from a place that's similar to what I have come from, and just having that common ground. It's been special. I mentioned in that video that I was going to be accepting questions and I was going to be doing a Q&A. Well, here's the deal. So I got a bunch of questions, and a lot of them were questions that I don't feel equipped to answer. They come at it more from the place of needing to know, needing to hear from a parent who has raised a child that they've adopted, and I haven't done that yet. I mean, Lord willing, that is in our future. There's a dog just bathing itself right next to us, so if you hear the licking, that's what's happening. A lot of the questions were, aimed towards someone who has raised an adopted child, and I don't have experience there. So, Lord willing, in the future, we'll be able to adopt. My husband and I have a big place in our heart for adoption, and hopefully the Lord opens those doors in the future for us, but it's not today. So I can't answer those questions, but I have my mom here with me, and she can answer those questions because she raised me. So, and I've been told you did a good job, but they don't know me real well.
I just did my best.
They don't know me that well.
There was a lot of prayer went into that parenting, but anyway.
Okay.
It was all good. It was all really good. But as a parent, you always are just sure you're going to goof up.
Yeah.
And so many times I prayed, God, just take my mistakes and use them for your good. And He certainly has. I am so blessed by Kim and her ministry.
Don't do that.
It's just, and this has just opened up a whole new avenue of ministry for Kim, I feel like.
Yeah.
And she is, I'm just really blessed.
Yeah, it has been very special. Excuse all the noises, the birds have joined the chat. So I think it's beautiful and serene. We're actually at my parents in Michigan. We're filming by their pond. You can kind of see it in the background. It's very serene and peaceful back here, but the birds are a part of the show. And the dogs.
And the dirty dogs.
The dirty dogs, they were swimming.
Who have been in the pond.
Yes. Okay, so we're just going to hop into some of the questions. Some of them were left on YouTube, in which I've been jotting them down as I come across them in my comment section. Some of these came through emails, which were very personal, and I do have permission to share those questions. And then I also have a bunch that I got on Instagram when I put my Instagram question box up, and I got a lot of questions. So we're just going to jump right in. A lot of them were the exact same question, worded differently, a lot of the same themes. So we do have a couple of main topics we're going to hit on. One of the questions that came through rather frequently was, what made my biological mom choose my parents, my adoptive parents? And obviously I can't answer that, so I thought I would bring my mom in for that perspective.
Yes, so anyone that's familiar with the adoption process, you create a profile, a little booklet about you and your family and your desires of raising children, how you want to raise them, what you want to offer them. And it just seemed like a really good match to her. Interesting enough, the minute that we met in person, we connected heart to heart. I mean, just like, bam, we were best friends. We just understood each other. We felt that love connection, and it was just very easy for us to have a good relationship from the start.
Yeah.
So it was
That's
just a good
awesome.
match. Yeah.
So a question that I know everyone's asking, and I would actually like to know the answer to, it doesn't change anything about like the process that happened, but did she know when she chose you and Dad that you would be raising me in a Mennonite environment? Because that is a question that came through a lot, is what, how did I come to the Mennonite culture if I came from, outside of the culture, and obviously it was just through adoption, but did she know that she would be raised, I would be raised?
We had pictures. We told her what kind of church we went to. All of that was in that profile.
Okay.
And she didn't seem afraid of it at all. She came from California, so we were a little worried about that. But we decided if it's God's will.
You mean you're worried that she wouldn't want to pick
she would
a
reject
conservative
us
family?
because that.
Okay, like not worried about you specifically.
No.
Worried
as
about
the
like a
conservative lifestyle.
Yes. Right. The cultural aspects from like they were in northern Indiana at the time, so which is where I live now currently, which is cool. But the cultural aspects from like California versus northern Indiana were just
big difference.
huge differences. And so I can see like that would have been a
big city to farm.
Yeah.
It's
and
like
maybe,
really big. And maybe that's what
she wanted.
Yeah. Maybe that's what intrigued her. Also, is something different than what she had been raised in and lived.
That is interesting. So the next question that came through a lot was if Daryl and I plan on adopting, and I kind of touched on that, but yes, we definitely would love to adopt at some point.
Yay.
Obviously when the Lord opens those doors, we have taken steps towards that in different ways in our lives. But so far the Lord has not opened the door, and we definitely feel like He's placed a lot in our lap right now with the 3 children that we do have, and so we are very busy with that. But I don't think the desire to adopt will ever go away. And so hopefully that's in our future, but it's not currently in the works. So there you go. All right, the next question was, so if I had a closed adoption, why did my parents, meet my biological mom at birth? And I think what they're implying by this is, why did she meet them in the regard that, like, why wasn't I just handed to them without even having to meet her? Which is, I guess, how sometimes it goes with closed.
It can. So there's different, how do you want to say, levels of adoption. There can be fully open, partially open, semi-closed, closed. Yeah. This was actually a little more semi-closed because we did meet at the beginning. I believe the reason she wanted to do that, and we really wanted to do that, but she wanted to do it because she is still a mom with a big heart for her kids, and she wanted to make sure that where she was placing her baby was going to be loving and safe and exactly what she was hoping for her baby. And if you're a mom, you can understand that.
You can relate. Adoption happens oftentimes because of really hard situations. They're put in these situations and given these options, and it's always awesome when they choose adoption, but I guess sometimes people can just view it as just they're rejecting a child, when in reality it takes courage to say, you know what, I can't offer this child the life that they deserve. And so then to take the act of faith in choosing someone to raise your baby, and so I think putting myself in her shoes, especially now that I have my own children, like I can just understand that I would want to meet the people that I've picked to take my baby, and it's obviously out of a place of love. It's not just total abandonment, it's not total rejection, it's carefully picking someone to step in and parent the child that you can't parent.
And just because they're in a hard place doesn't mean they don't care.
Exactly. Yeah.
They do care. That's why we didn't have an abortion story here, because she really did care.
And in a lot of stories, I think it's not the same. There are stories of abandonment and rejection, and those that is sad. But I just don't want it to come across as like that is every adoption experience. I don't want that to come across that every birth parent has that mindset.
Right.
Okay, this is something interesting for Mom to answer. I don't know how I feel about it, and I asked Daryl, and he didn't know how he felt, and so I was interested to get your perspective.
Maybe I don't know how I feel about it.
Casually put you in the hot seat here. Okay, so the question is, do you think it should be required for potential adoptive parents, like they're wanting to adopt,
Yeah.
should it be required that they do classes or training on how to deal with child trauma, like the trauma that's going to come from the adoption process?
We asked about that when we were in our home study phase, and they told us it can be beneficial. I'm not saying it can't be beneficial, but, and I believe it could be very beneficial, but they said each situation is so different, and so many adoptive parents make more out of it than what it is. They will take a normal teenager's problems and make it all about adoption. And so they said, don't focus on that. Raise them like a teenager. If they're a teenager, it's when they're going through it. Or, you know, just take each day at a time and you will know, they said. Now, when you do get into tough times, seek advice. There's nothing wrong with that. Seek advice. Go get some training if it gets to that point.
If the Lord brings adoption into your life, if He calls you to adoption, He's going to, I'm not going to say you're automatically going to be equipped to do it. I think like there is going to be a learning curve that's going to come with it, but like there will be people that you can talk to. There's going to be resources. I don't think the Lord's going to call you to adoption and then just leave you there with no follow-up, no help. But I guess I wouldn't say, like, it's just asking if it should be a requirement.
Right.
And I don't feel like it should be a requirement.
I don't know if it should be a requirement. It is a requirement
I think
to
it's
love
a resource.
no matter what. That's what a kid needs the most is love. When they're acting out or whatever. They need to know that you are stable, you are not going anywhere, and you love them no matter what happens. You love them.
Right. And it's not, we're not diminishing the fact that there is trauma. We're not saying that they're, that a child that comes to us, and every situation is different. I don't know how many times I have to say that. But we're not diminishing the fact that if a child does come with trauma and they're really struggling with it, that you should just like be like, well, I love you, so deal with it. Like, no, that's not at all the answer. The answer is obviously to like tailor your parenting to each child. And you know your child the best. And so obviously like ask the Lord for wisdom in like dealing with all of that, and don't be afraid to just reach out for help and say, you know what, this is kind of out of my area of expertise, and say like I could use some wisdom spoken into my life and my situation. Be willing to accept that, and to hear from people that do have the answers is.
And by all means, if you're more comfortable, you know, more training is never hurtful.
Exactly.
You know,
can all use that.
But whether it should be required, I don't know. I
feel like I would
sure
lean away from being a requirement, but I think it can be a resource.
Yeah.
That would be my opinion. Okay, this is a several part question. This is, what is something that, in my opinion, as an adopted child, would an adopted child want to hear, to feel heard and comforted, but still know that the pain is accepted and not too much for the adoptive parents and family? This woman has 3 adopted children and 1 biological child. The one that's asking this question. It's really hard to answer this question because I think it's so situation specific. Like each child has different love languages, has different ways of feeling heard and seen and understood. I find myself in the camp of what is nice to know, like growing up, was that I'm part of this family. I think the most ostracizing thing about being an adopted child was being different. Like every time I felt like I was struggling in my growing up years, in my teen years especially, kind of went through a phase there, it was just that I was different and just feeling different constantly. But I think I would have just wanted to belong. I think I would have wanted to be reassured, and I was reassured, that I just belong in this family, that I am part of this family, and that even though like I have a different story, it's
different is not bad.
Yeah, it's no more or less important than any of my siblings. And I think from my own perspective, like I can't speak for all adopted children. Someone out there is going to watch this video that was adopted and say like, well, that's not what I wanted. And that's totally fine. That's the way it works. And I think that's something that's interesting and fascinating about adoption conversation is like everybody's different and responds differently.
Even your biological children, every single one of them, you need to parent a little bit different. But the adopted kid has more to work through. Yeah. I will acknowledge that.
100%.
More to work through. But, yeah.
But I've come to the place, like as an adult, I've come to understand with just talking with different friends of mine that every person struggles with identity.
Yep.
Every person
And
struggles
rejection.
with, they struggle with rejection, with where they belong. And you know what? It's not specific to adoptees. And yeah, it can often just, in the adopted circles, it can just become your crutch. It's like, well, I'm different. I don't belong. I don't know, and it's just, we can use them as excuses, and oftentimes they are used.
Yeah.
Someone asked if there were ever times that I struggled to feel loved, and I don't think so. Like, that is not something that was ever a question in my mind. There obviously were times of questioning, the typical, like, who am I? What do I come from? Do I belong? Things like that. But never if I was loved or not, because it was always something that you and Dad really instilled in me when I was struggling, that, yes, you are in a hard time right now, you're asking questions we don't have answers for, but we do love you and you're part of this family. And that was just like constantly in my ear. And so, like, the question of am I loved was never a problem. Now, someone once told me, and it's stuck with me, is that something that they noticed, they have adopted children, she had told me that what she noticed with adopted children is they will slam the door and say, you don't love me.
Yeah.
And it's easy as a parent to be like, oh, fine, I'll let you cool off. Yeah. But what that child needs is for you to rip that door open and say, actually, I love you so much. Yeah. And I think, like, any child, not just an adopted child, is going to push you to that point. They're going to say, well, you don't love me, because they want you to say, that's incorrect. I love you so much. And adopted children, not like, I think every child comes to that point, but I think an adopted child, they have to test that. They have to say, how bad, how ugly can I be? How much can I throw your love back at you? And to see, will you still love me? Will you still reach for me when I won't reach for you? And so, yeah, no, like, I would say, like, I never experienced, like, if I reached for love and I, in the way of saying, well, you don't love me, it was never, that energy was never reciprocated. It was always, no, that's not true. Like, we do love you. We do love you. You have to deal with it. Like, you can't make me stop loving you. And that was always a reassuring part of my childhood. Someone asked me, I'm sorry, some of these questions were directed right at me because, I had opened up for questions. So I'm just going to hit one more.
I'm learning.
Was one more that's specifically for me. So what was the coolest thing about being adopted? The coolest thing about being adopted is when my sisters or my brothers are being weird, or they are commenting on something they don't like about themselves, whether it's personality, whether it's body type, whether it's genetics. I can always be like, well, not me. Sucks to be you. They always comment about different things. I'm like, well, not me. I'm not, I don't have the same blood. I don't have the genetics. So we get to be sisters, but I don't have to have your genetic downfalls. So that's kind of cool. I love that. I love that. Not to mention I probably have some genetic downfalls of my own.
Yeah, they probably did it the other way too.
But anyway, what age did my parents tell me that I was adopted? And this question kept popping up. People wanted to know, when is the appropriate age to tell a child that they've been adopted? Because I was adopted as an infant, if you're unfamiliar with my story. I was adopted as an infant. People are asking that question. When was I told, and when is the appropriate age to tell a child that they're adopted?
So you want me to answer
I'll
that?
let you answer it, because we both feel very strongly.
I am really very opinionated on this part of it all.
We almost didn't even want to talk about it. We almost didn't even want to open a can of worms.
I'm always like, yeah. I feel very strongly that a child should never remember the first time they were told.
Yes.
They should never remember the first time they were told. It should be part of their story, because it is. In ways, loving ways, even by saying, you were born in my heart, and I love you so much. That's the beginning.
Yeah.
And as they ask questions, you just tell them a little more, and they never remember. Do you remember?
No, I have no recollection of being told that I was adopted.
No, because it's no who they are. It's part of them. Why shouldn't they know?
And because I don't remember hearing that, it's not a point where I can go back to in my mind and, like, obsess over. Yeah. And feed on that feeling of being told, because I think, like, if you're at the age of understanding, you're going to remember being told, and it can come with emotions that, as a 7-year-old, 9-year-old, you are not equipped to deal with. And so why not make that a part, like a common knowledge, a part of that child, not in a way that they're set apart and different,
No.
but just because, like, you know what, you have a different story and it's special, and, you know, just like instill in them that they're not this weird alien because of it, but just that it's there. It's just part of
It's just
you.
a form of acceptability at all times.
Because you can.
This is just who our family is.
Right.
This is how God made our family.
Right.
And it's just, it starts with that. Just them feeling accepted. They never remember that you, as their parent, is rejecting them. You've always been theirs. Yours. You know?
Yeah. If your child is adopted,
Older.
and I recently had this conversation with someone. If your child is adopted and you've told them, you've communicated to them you're adopted, you know, you've made it a common knowledge, and they've said, okay, and they've moved on with life, and you're feeling like they should be asking more, they should want more, I would say just do not push that. That child is going to come to you and is going to ask questions when he or she is ready, when they feel like, and like then give answers that like fit
that are age appropriate.
Yes, and like fit their understanding, and don't just dump and like force them to understand and know all of the aspects, because there will come a day that your child will ask and they will want to know. And I can say this confidently just because I am adopted, that Lord willing, your child is 16 or older.
Yes.
Lord willing, because then you're kind of coming to the age of understanding, and you can deal with the emotions, the things that are going to overwhelm you with the way you feel and the way you process. Like what we're saying here, just to summarize this, is just age-appropriate answers when they ask, when they feel like they're...
And not more detail than they need.
Right.
So if they want more detail, they will ask for more detail.
Yep.
So if you just answer the question that they've asked in a nice, easy way, age-appropriate way, and that usually will satisfy. That's what we found in our lives anyway.
And I found it to be very satisfactory.
Yeah.
Like, one thing on this topic of when to tell your child, there is something that should never happen, and that is that you never tell. I mean, if you plan to never tell your child that they're adopted, shame on you. I'm sorry, that is such strong language. There is absolutely no reason.
And you will lose them.
And you will lose it. The minute that child finds out that you withheld that information, they're going to reject you, because you're going to be the face of that hurt and that pain and that lie. Their whole identity is going to crash to the ground. They're going to question everything about themselves, and you're going to be the face of that rejection.
The trust in you has been broken.
Absolutely broken. I know that there's going to be different opinions on this. You can disagree with us, but coming from someone who has adopted and someone who has been adopted, our stance on not ever telling your child they're adopted is never okay. I would say if you think your child would not ever find out,
nope,
you're living in delusion.
Whether you tell them or not,
they're going to find out.
100%
They will
tell
find
you
out.
that they will find out.
Especially given the genetic testing that is all the craze right now. Your child sends some spit to 23andMe, and it's over for you. It's over.
Yeah.
So... Yeah. I don't know. That's our opinion. Moving on. The next topic is one that we have almost not even talked about. I don't know. Everyone is wanting opinions on a very specific topic. And I guess we're gonna get into it, and we're gonna just bite the bullet. And I want to say, prefacing this, that you're welcome to your opinion, and what we say should not change your opinion. It is simply our opinion, our experience. My mom has experienced different sides of the aisle on this one, and so we just have some different viewpoints, and we're going to share those with you, not because this is how you should do it, but because this is what we have seen firsthand, and it has built and grown our opinions here. So what we're going to talk about is open adoption versus closed adoption. My adoption was closed. Mom's kind of implied it was a semi-closed. I guess to her it probably felt semi-closed because she had a relationship with my birth mom. To me it felt like it was closed
totally
tight. I didn't have a picture. I knew her name, but like I knew nothing else except for the state I was born in. So like I didn't have medical history. I just had nothing. And
the open part was only at the birth.
Right.
Before and at the birth. Right. After the birth, it became a closed adoption.
Now, I have a sibling that was not biological to me, but he was adopted from another state, and his adoption was open? Semi-open?
Well,
or like
semi-open,
okay.
like through the attorney.
Yeah.
We had to go through the attorney for contact.
There was contact.
But there was regular contact through letters, pictures,
gifts.
Yes. Not anything in person.
Right.
But
But there was
yeah.
a relationship there. These questions were all worded in so many different ways. I'm just going to summarize it into one big question. I'll ask you, Mom, because I'm gonna just throw the ball in your court.
Easy way out.
Yeah, you don't have to show up and vlog for these people next week.
Yeah.
You can just go back to your little life, and if they eat you alive in the comment section, you can be unbothered. Just peace out and head out. So I'm just gonna ask you real quick to summarize your opinions on open versus closed. Not saying one is wrong or the other is right, but just from your perspective, having done a little of both, what is your perspective on open versus closed?
Each child processes adoption differently.
Yeah.
You can have an open adoption with 2 different kids, and it will go totally different ways.
Absolutely.
So when we are talking about it, of course, the only thing we can pretty much go by is what we have experienced. In our experience, yes, closed adoption is hard, but maybe at the end of the day was better for the child because there was a decision that had to be made early on that they needed to decide where they belonged. Who were they going to be? And I would tell my kids all the time, this may have happened, that may have happened to cause this, but we are here right now. And right now, we go from here to tomorrow. And we decide. And you get to decide who you are. An adopted kid gets to decide who they are. Open adoption can answer some questions earlier in their lives, but it also, every contact can cause that little niggle of rejection again, that little niggle of doubt, that big question, why? Why? You're wanting contact with me? Why am I not with you? What, and that's a lot to figure out in a kid's mind. Yeah. It's a lot to figure out in my mind. Whether one is right and one is wrong, I'm staying away from that.
Yeah.
That is too big of a decision for me to make for you. However, I would caution on too open of an adoption relationship until, of course, the child can decide that.
Coming from my perspective, if I was going to adopt a child, would I go for open or closed? And I agree with everything that was said. Closed adoption was so hard. When I was in those formative years of 8 to 13, I had all these questions. I was like, I just need to know. But yeah, I had to fill in with different answers that, you know what, I'm a part of this family. My identity is in Christ. I did have these questions, and there were some formative years where I really craved answers. But I wasn't given those until I was older. And in my maturity as an adult, looking back, I am so grateful that I was protected from some of the details and that I was given time to grow in who I was and the family that I was placed in before I was bombarded with these other details that hit home. Like, it's your identity, it's who you are. And so for myself, having like the closed adoption was such a positive thing. I'm not going to say it wasn't met with like hard things as a child. So my opinion on open is that what she said is like it can so easily be rejection again and again. I have a lot of friends and people close to me that are adopted through like an open adoption, and I have seen what that rejection has done over and over and over again. I'm not saying every open adoption is going to go that way. My opinion is that open adoption can be done really well.
It can.
Let's say I was going to adopt and it needed to be open because of the circumstances. It needed to be open. Here's what I would do. My opinion is that God puts adoptive families in the middle of this adoption relationship as a moderator, because that parent is now taking care of this adopted child. This is not true of fostering. This is true of adoption. This adoptive parent is placed in a role of authority and protection of this child, and that sometimes takes the understanding and realization that that relationship with the birth family is potential pain and rejection, and you're there as an adoptive parent to moderate that. And sometimes that looks like that birth parent saying, I want to see the child, and you saying, you know what, my child's not doing well right now, we're going to put that on hold. And moderating how much contact and how how much your child is available to the biological parent. That child may be 3 or 5 and can't say, that hurt.
Yeah.
That I had to, see my biological siblings and I couldn't go home with them. Or it hurt that my biological mom didn't write me a letter back. Right. They can't say that oftentimes, but they're going to feel that. And so your job as a parent, my job as a parent, if I'm ever put in this position, is going to be, I see that hurt in my child, and I see that that's not healthy, that's not building this child in the right direction, and it's going to be saying to the biological parent that you may need to step back while we raise this child right now. And maybe that's you as the parent having the relationship with the birth parent. Maybe it's you passing some information back and forth, but your child just goes to you directly. And then you can maybe be the moderator between. Yes. Does that make sense?
I do. I totally agree with that.
Turning off like
and
direct contact. Maybe.
Right.
I don't know how I feel about direct contact. I guess that's what I'm saying.
And what came to my mind is, so when we talk open adoption, oftentimes people have the best thing they can possibly imagine in their minds when they are the adoptive parents. However, sometimes birth parents are doing good and they will have good relationship back and forth, and then all of a sudden and this happened to us, that the child writes birth mom a letter and gets 0 response.
Yes.
And he writes another one and gets 0 response. Yes. Now what is happening? So as
so
that
much
moderator,
pain, so much rejection.
You have to put the child's well-being first.
And that is so hard.
You are there for that.
And it goes back to what you said previously about like adoptive parents sometimes feel like they absolutely have to appease the biological family or they're going to lose their child. And that is not your role as an adoptive parent. God gave you that child because he expects you to protect and to guide that child. And sometimes in your wisdom of doing that, you have to say, I'm going to have to put a barrier here. I'm going to have to separate the contact. I'm not going to say that that's true of every single relationship, every single adoption. I just never want you guys to take what we're saying and think that this is the way it has to be. But just from our own experience with this, I guess I'm just going to answer the question of if I were adopting.
You are the advocate for your child. That's who you are. And you decide, as you're watching your child, as you're dealing with your child, is it healthy? Is it not healthy?
Right.
And you are the responsible advocate.
I think for myself, like that would be something like I would be super honest with the birth mom if I was going to be in the process of adopting, and I would say, hey, I just want you to understand that this is my view of relationships, and if they're really pushing for open, I'll say, you know what? Yes, I'll moderate that for the first 18 years. And then after that, like I think that child has a right to have direct contact if your child comes to an age of understanding at 18. But I think like that is something that can be welcomed later. And then that child is kind of an adult at that point. I mean, if I look back at me at 18, I was totally not an adult. But like technically
technically at 18,
technically that
you
child
can decide what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And when the open adoption came to let's meet in person, all of a sudden my child was not ready. And the birth parents took it very offensively. However, that takes a lot of bravery.
It takes a long time. And what's hard about like the very open adoptions is that these children, and what I've seen before is these children are put in this position where they're sitting on a park bench and there's mom and there's mom. Yeah. And it's like, what is happening? Yeah. And as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, they can't tell you, I don't understand what's happening right now. I love you as my mom. You've always been there, but this woman says she's my mom, and it's just like this tug of war emotionally. And in such a young child's mind, it can be so hard to comprehend that you're able to love too. Yeah. You're able. Yeah. And sometimes, and I'm just going to say this lightly, I want you to hear my heart in this, but sometimes when I see someone pushing so hard for open adoption with no barriers, with no restrictions on contact, what I see is a selfish biological mother. This is coming from an adoptee's perspective. That's why I say this with the boldness.
You can say that. I'm not going to say that.
I can say this. If you want to be honest, if you want to accept the reality, you have to admit that there is a sliver of selfishness in demanding a relationship from a child who cannot cognitively understand why you had to make the decision that you did, demanding a relationship with that child with no barriers set in place, you have to admit it is a little bit selfish. And I'm going to get so roasted in the comments. Like there's going to be a woman in the room.
Are you
she's
ready?
She's typing like, you don't understand what you're talking about. Maybe I don't. Yeah. But I do. I have lived as an adoptee for 24 years. I can speak to you from my heart and from my experience. And that's where I find myself on closed versus open. And I want to summarize this by saying open adoption can be so well done. It can be so beautiful. But it's just, there are so many challenges.
It can be confusing.
And confusion. Also. And as with closed adoption, you know what? Yeah. Let's summarize this by saying both are hard. Let's just negate everything we just said.
Both can be done well and both can be done bad.
There.
So okay, there. Good. There's our answer.
There's our answer. Wow, we really took the long way around to get to absolutely no conclusion. But I guess I hope you can see our heart in that. Yeah. I hope you can see where we're coming from. I hope you can understand. We're not trying to come down on birth mothers. We're not trying to come down on adoptive parents that have opened the doors to an open adoption. We're not trying to come down on anyone.
No judging on what your decisions have been. No. You know your situations.
Absolutely. I can't speak into each situation because I am not there. I'm not part of it. But for my situation specifically and going into adoption, if we ever are given that opportunity, this is where I find myself.
Which will be really cool if you do that, because then you can talk from both sides.
I know, because then, in like, how many years I'll be like, well, that didn't work. Back to you, Mom. All right, so there are more questions. We should do a part 2 sometime. There's so many other questions we could get into, but I think we covered. There was a lot there. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
It's a lot for all of you to process. Now that we've set the comment section afire, I think we're just gonna head out, let everything burn behind us. I hope, like I said 100 times now, I hope you see our heart in this. Adoption is such a cool thing.
It really is.
It has become so near and dear to my heart, and I know that some of you are not there. Given the conversations we've had, some of you are hurting, some of you are struggling with the story that God has given you, and my heart goes out to you, and I hope that in your growing in Christ, that you can come to a place of understanding. His love and his plan for you is so well designed, and even though there are questions and hard things, it's going to be beautiful when he's finished. Yes. And I hope you can see the end goal. And he doesn't ask us to go through things alone, and it is such a comfort to me. It has been all my life that I'm never alone in my hurt, in my struggle.
And it's your story, and God is writing it. It doesn't matter who you are.
Yes,
God is writing your story. And at the end, it will be beautiful if you follow his storyline.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you are completely unfamiliar with like the adoption topic and like the whole like adoption thing, enjoy this bucket of ice cold water in your face. We just held back nothing. But there's our opinions. Thank you so much for sitting with us and chatting about adoption. This has been so fun. I knew the minute I started reading these questions that I needed Mom here. I knew we needed to have this conversation together, and I appreciate that she was willing to do this and take time. She's supposed to be canning green beans today, and now she's not.
This is more fun.
So maybe I should go can her green beans for her. But this has been really special. It's been fun to sit down and chat with with you about this. I don't think we've ever done anything on a formal level like this.
No, we haven't.
It's been fascinating. I love that I'll have this video forever. Give it a like. If you liked it, and if you hated it, go to the comment section and you tell us how you feel. You push this video right to the algorithm. You get in those comments. And subscribe to my channel, because you never know what's going to pop up next. Yep. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Hopefully it will not be quite as opinionated as this one. So have a good week, you guys. See you in the next one. Bye.